Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane, and this is episode 7. I have a couple of topics lined up for you. There might be a third bonus topic depending on how we go with time. I'm going to be talking to you about if not now, when, and I'll also be talking to you about some latest news. So I'll start with if not now, when. Even though my specialty or what I'm largely talking about is health, this can relate to more than one thing in life. This can relate to lots of aspects of life. What I see a lot is people putting off things in their life, putting off things until later, saying I need to wait until I have this and this and this and all these things set up before they can do something. And it's you see it a lot in regards to health too. It's like, well, until I have all these things in a row, I can't do this thing. Or I can't look after my health until I can go to the gym and I can't go to the gym yet. Well, there's lots of things you can do to look after your health that don't require the gym. But anyway, so and I'm not saying that it's never appropriate to put things off or things don't have a purpose for being in a certain order. Of course, a lot of things in life do require you've got to do that thing first before you can do the next thing. And there's sort of practical and sensible reasons why sometimes we put things off. I get all of that. But what I see a lot of is people using excuses. To just not do what they need to do. So there's a difference between sensible planning of things and just excuses to just not get things done. So I'm talking about the excuses. So what people do is they say, well, the example I gave before, right? It's like, well, I can't look after my health until I go to the gym. And then it's, I can't go to the gym until I've got all the right gym gear, right? So until I save up the money and go shopping for the gym gear, then I can't go to the gym. And like you might need a decent pair of shoes, of course, but you don't need all the latest. You don't need Lululemon. I've been going to the gym for years. I don't have Lululemon. That's okay. If you've never heard of it, that's a good thing. If you have heard of it, just very expensive gym wear, right? You don't need Lululemon to go to the gym, right? So we do kind of put roadblocks in the way. And so my question to you is you're doing the if not now, you're doing that, well, not yet, I can't do it until blah, blah, blah. The question would be, or the my suggestion to you would be to ask yourself what that's about, if that excuse you're putting in the way is valid or if it's just a way to put off doing the thing that you need to do or the thing that you want to do. There's and it's understanding that what's the motivation behind that thing that's in the way. Is it just an excuse or is it valid? And if it is valid, then what do you need to do about it as well? So what happens is people, like I said, they say so until I get all my ducks in a row. You have all the ducks in a row. Well, there's no such thing as having all of your ducks in a row. It doesn't happen. The truth about life is just every time you think you've got it sorted and it's all something pops up here and something pops up over there and something goes wrong there. And so it's just the truth of life. There's no such thing as all your ducks in a row. It's not going to happen. And the other thing too is I don't know if you've ever watched ducks, but have you ever watched a mother duck get her ducks in a row? You know how she does it? She does it by just starting. She starts walking and they follow and they get in line behind her, right? So she doesn't stand there and say, Huey, Dewey, Louie, and tell them all to get in line. She doesn't stand there until she's got the line straight, until she's got it all planned, until she's got it all perfect. She just begins, right? And as she begins, things just line up. The ducks just line up behind her. The ducklings just all line up, right? So a lot of times in life, what we need to do is we need to begin, we need to start something, right? And it's not about waiting for the ducks to be in a row. It's not waiting for everything to be perfect. It's not waiting until we can afford the Lululemon. And then, of course, we don't want to go because we don't think we look good in the Lululemon because we feel like we need to lose weight or whatever it is. And that's not going to happen until you start eating well and go to the gym and do the things you need to do, right? So it's kind of like cart before the horse. Sometimes we just need to just do the thing and we need to do it imperfectly until we can do it better. It's just simple as that. We just need to start. When you begin, there's several things that happen when you begin. One, you finally, you have to, You don't have to spend so much energy on, I've really got to do the thing, and when I'm going to do the thing, and the thing like that. That it just gives you more space in your head because you've just begun and you've just allowed that space. That was because before, the space was just constantly obsessing about when are you going to start a thing, you haven't started a thing, how come you haven't started a thing. And it's kind of, when we do that, that's where we get lots of self-talk, negative self-talk, and doubts, and kind of disappointment in ourselves, and feel like we're failing and all that jazz, right? So you actually stop that whole thing because you just begin, right? So for starters, beginning is just really good for your headspace. It just clears your headspace of that obsession about how come you haven't done the thing. You just start doing the thing, right? um, the next thing that happens is when you begin, you get momentum. You can't get momentum if you're not moving. It just doesn't work that way. If you ever seen a car or a train or whatever, watch a train build up momentum. It doesn't go from go to, it doesn't go from standing still to kind of the momentum immediately. Oh, there might be certain cars that do and all that jazz, but you know what I mean. Things have to build up, right? You build momentum. So what happens is, but you don't build momentum by sitting on the lounge at home and going, well, I'm just waiting for it to happen for me, or I'm just waiting for my opportunity, or I'm just waiting for someone to come and offer me the whatever it is, right? It doesn't work that way. It works because you move. Excuse me, I've got to have some water. Momentum comes from moving, momentum comes from action. So you've actually just got to move it, right? One of my friends, that the way she describes it is, she says also that the universe rewards action. So it could be in university, it could be God, it could be, whatever you want to call it. But I actually do think there's something in that just once we get into action, once we get into momentum, then things start to fall in place. And funnily enough, that is actually when you start getting answers. That's when you start getting, the things that seem to be in the way, they start to move out of the way, because either they just move out of the way naturally, or because you're in momentum now, it's happening, that just falls away, or you just get answers to, or clarification on how to get past that, or to get around that, or to deal with that thing that's in the way. But none of that happens until you begin. So you've got to begin to do it. The other thing too is with opportunities in our lives, is they don't come to us, you, they're not drawn to you when you're just sitting around hoping something will happen. They're drawn to you when your energy changes, and your energy changes when you begin. Your energy changes when you have momentum. Your energy changes when you're not obsessing about the fact that you haven't done the thing. So they're all the reasons that, in most cases, in lots of things, we just need to get started. So you need to start, and you need to do it. You need to do it with, or you can choose to do it. I always talk about the language of, I talk about language a lot. So but you choose to do this, and you do this, you get that momentum, you clear your mind, you get started. And that's actually why people are drawn to you, why situations are drawn to you, why opportunities are drawn to you. They're drawn to your energy. And the reason that your energy is so good and vibrant, and is like a magnet drawing opportunities to you, is because you got started. It just all comes back to the beginning, is just begin. We really, really need to begin. I'm just checking my notes to see what if I've missed anything on this topic too, because I wrote a few things just in case I missed it. Yeah, the other aspect of this is actually the fear of failure that people have. One of the reasons they don't begin is they're afraid of failing. And you absolutely have to be prepared to fail. Be prepared to fail. It's part of it. That's part of life. Even I think I was reading about Elon Musk, the latest that rocket launch thing, and that blew up recently. I was reading about that, and that was actually a known thing, that was what was likely going to happen. But they had to learn. I don't know. I don't understand. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist. I don't pretend to be. But essentially, my understanding of it is that it's all part of the process of learning how to make this happen. Is they have to build it, they have to test it, they have to test all the things, and that so the whole launch and everything, it wasn't about that they thought they were going to get a rocket to Mars or whatever it was. It was more about the process of learning all of the things involved and getting the learnings out of this so they can do it again and they can do it better next time. So, and some of the entrepreneurs in the world like them or loathe them or whatever, but different ones in all different ways in all around the world. One thing that you can say about them is that they're usually really brave and they're usually prepared to fail, because you have to be prepared to fail because they take big risks, and big risks come with big rewards, but also big failures and big, challenging things as well, right? So it's actually being prepared to fail is part of this, and failure sometimes isn't a really important part of getting where you want to go, because unless you fail, yeah, and if you've ever read an autobiography, I love biographies and autobiographies, but I really love autobiographies. You will find out very quickly that all of the things that people have done to get to where they were. And most of them, it doesn't start with, well, very rarely does it start with, well, I was just sitting at home and then suddenly someone came and offered me such and such job and now I'm a famous Hollywood actor, or now I run Tesla, or now I do whatever it is, right? It doesn't happen that way. I started because I had to go at this, they had to go at the other thing, they had to go at something else, they failed at this, they realized they were good at this thing, they realized they were bad at that thing, they went for this and they really thought they wanted that, but it turned out that that led them to something else which they wanted even more, blah blah blah, right? But essentially what happens is people trip over sideways here, there and everywhere to get where they need to go. It's not a straight line, and it doesn't happen from sitting around at home. It happens from just beginning. And when we look at that from a health perspective, how many excuses do we use to not look after our health? Now, there can be a whole lot of reasons why it can be more challenging at this time than other times, and I have covered that in a previous podcast. I can't remember which one, sorry, but essentially, I think it's the one about self care anyway. Essentially, of course, we're limited to whatever it is that the time we have right now, the energy we have right now, the money we have right now, if there's money involved in whatever you need to do to look after your health, right? I totally get that. However, there is always something you can do. And be aware of how much you're just putting things off just to put things off, and how much you're putting things off just to avoid doing them. Because it doesn't get easier. And it doesn't get easier. Like, it doesn't get easier because you put it off for 5 years or 10 years. Actually, it gets harder, especially with health. So the best time to do it is 10 years ago, and the next best time to do it is now, because now's all you've got. You don't have the option to go back 10 years ago. But don't use all the excuses of getting your ducks in a row, or I can't look after my health until I have Lululemon tights, sorry, whatever they're called, activewear. I don't have Lululemon, and I look after myself, and that's okay. You don't need to have that. You don't need to have it all perfect. You don't need to do it all perfect. You don't have to be doing everything. That's the other thing too. You do what you can do, but don't wait until you can do 37 things to look after your health until you do one thing. If you can only do one thing at the moment, do one thing. If you can do two things, do two things. If you can do 10, fantastic, right? But don't not do any because you can't do one of them. Like, just because one is not in your reach right now. If going to the gym is not on your reach right now, or maybe you don't even want to go in the first place, but if that's not in your reach right now, that doesn't prevent you from going for a walk, or eating well, or being aware of your thoughts, being aware of being around, reading autobiographies and listening to podcasts and things like that that are stimulating and educational and support your growth as a human being. There's lots of things we can do to support our health, to support our spiritual growth, to support our just our life as a growth as a human being. There's lots of things we can do to support that, and you don't need every single thing in a row perfectly to do that. So it's just a matter of kind of going, what are all the things I've got available to me right now? How many of them can I do? Okay, I will do that, and I will just focus on that now. And then in the future, it might open up. There might be more possibility of me doing the other thing, right? So when we sort of say that we can't do it until we've got it all set up in a certain way, that's just really an excuse not to do it at all. So, if not now, when? And when it gets harder and harder as we get older, and eventually opportunities decrease and all of that kind of stuff. So, just get started, just do something, be prepared to be ordinary, be prepared to make mistakes. That's okay. How does someone learn to play guitar or learn to sing or all the things, right? You learn to sing well by singing really badly a lot. You learn to play guitar by playing really badly a lot. That's just how it works. So it's not going to be perfect. That's fine. And your ducks aren't all going to be in a row. Never are. Not going to happen. So just get started. So, the next thing I wanted to do, and there was another little topic that I thought I might throw in here. So, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about life changing events. Life changing events, when something happens to you that is just really, really huge. And for me, my experience is in regards to health and in regards to grief. Everyone's got their own experience of this. But when we do have something happen to us that is really huge, that really shakes us to our core, that really shocks us, that really takes a lot out of us. What happens a lot in our society is that we are forced to kind of get over it really fast and move on really fast and pretend that everything's okay really quickly. And while I am all for understanding the reality of, there's always someone worse off than me. There's always children in hospital with cancers, and there's always all sorts of things going on in the world. And understanding that in compared to the rest of the world, and as far as things go, you're doing pretty well compared to other people. So I get that. So it is good to have perspective, and it is good to understand that, whatever is happening to you isn't the worst thing in the whole world, or there's other people that could be worse off, or you're not the only one, or whatever. So I totally get that. And I think that a long term strategy for healing and for health is to understand that you're just one of many, and life can be really tough, and having some perspective around it, and not kind of living in that victim place forever. I totally agree with that. I'm totally in support of that. However, excuse me, I'll just have some water. However, the problem is that sometimes we try and move from I've just had this event to I'm fine, and we do it at breakneck speed, and we don't allow ourselves any time to process it in between. And I think that leads to a longer term issue of being a victim for longer, or feeling like a victim for longer, or just not recovering well, and having kind of all these things kind of build up, and then you're more likely to have the big event, whether it be a big health event, or whether it be a breakdown of some sort, or breakdown of relationships, or whatever it is. But you're not going to cope in the future because you didn't deal with whatever that thing is now. So it is okay when you have a life changing event. Like for me, it was those a couple of strokes that I had when I was in my 20s. Now, they were relatively mild compared to what some people experience, and I was okay, and I am okay. So I did get perspective. I had understood the perspective of that there's people worse off, and that at least I'm going to be okay, and I'm still alive, and all of that. I got all of that, right? However, I was also terrified. I was so anxious, and I was just thinking that it was going to happen again, and I was going to die before I was 30, and my life was pretty much done. And I was felt fearful, and felt I felt like my body had betrayed me. I didn't trust my body anymore. I didn't feel safe in my body anymore. I didn't feel safe anymore, because when you become that, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, whatever it is, but when you become that small percentage of people, that's there's so certain percentage of people who have had this happen to them at this age, and blah blah blah. When you become that person, suddenly you look at the world differently. And instead of being, 10 foot tall and bulletproof like you are when you're young, and even if you are young when this happens to you, which I was in my 20s, suddenly you look at the world from a point of view of the one percenter. And when you're the one percenter, you're more serious about things, you're more careful about things. You think that it can happen to you, you know that it can happen to you. And so the way you look at everything is a different perspective. And you are just still reeling from all of the experiences of everything that you've just been through. You are grieving for, like I'm grieving for some of the loss of my vision and some other health problems I have. So when we have a big health event happen to us, or it could be other events, but I'm talking more about health because that's my specialty, but there's other events as well, and grief is one of them. And we have grief. Well, we have grief around health as well. So you have a lot of grief around the thing that you lost in your health, not being who you were before, not being able to be carefree or think that way again because now your life has changed. Now being one of like those people, like the sick people or the person with a problem or the person who's had the thing happen to them or whatever it is. Um, but there's also grief of losing people in our lives and stuff like that, and that's life changing as well, absolutely life changing. But whatever the thing is, whatever the major event that's happened to us, is it is okay to spend some time being angry. It is okay to spend some time being scared, and to just go through all of the different emotions around all of that. One thing that can be really helpful, I found this helpful. This is what I did. I actually wrote my story. I didn't write it for anyone else. I wrote it for me, and I wrote it in a real kind of immature language, as in the idea wasn't to share a story of people with people of my amazing thing. It wasn't that. I'd written some versions of that just in small blogs and things, but it wasn't that. I wrote this from a perspective of emotion, and kind of like, just this is what I went through, and you didn't help me, or you didn't help me, or I had to look after you instead of you looking after whatever it was. But I just wrote the kind of emotional, immature kind of just the raw emotion of it. This happened and I felt like this. This happened and I felt like that. This happened and I was really scared and I wish that I had had this help, or I wish you had have done this or whatever. So it wasn't meant for anyone else, and it wasn't about blaming anyone else for anything. It was just me processing what had happened, right? And that can be really useful. But if you write something really nasty, I've written some nasty things to process things, I burn them because I think that's just a sensible thing to do, because things can blow up on you in life if you've written sort of, and sometimes we don't feel safe uh, to write truthfully and to write your emotions and things down. You might not feel safe to do that if it's something you're going to keep, or you might, up to you, but you can certainly burn it afterwards. But it can be really, really powerful way of processing that stuff. And I also saw sort of counselors and whoever it was, and talk to friends and all of the rest of it. But don't go from the things happened and it happened last week, and 3 days later you're looking after everybody else. You're telling them it's all going to be okay, and I'm so lucky, and blah blah blah. Because when people come up and tell you that you're lucky, I can tell you, you do not feel lucky at the time, even though when you get perspective, and I get all that from a academic point of view. Of course, you're lucky, you're still alive, and all that, right? So there's a part of us that absolutely knows we're lucky and can tune into that and understand that. And long term, that's a good place to find yourself. However, when it has just happened to you, you do not feel lucky. You feel dreadful, you feel terrible, and you're not feeling lucky at all. And it's okay that you're not. You don't have to, right? So essentially, I'm saying that it's okay to have whatever emotions you're having. It's important to process those emotions whatever way is comfortable with you, whether it's through writing, whether it's through therapy, whether it's through music, whether it's through singing, whether it's through art, however it is. But process those emotions and be okay. Don't feel ashamed for having the emotions. Don't feel ashamed that that's the experience you're having. It's actually really normal. And it's only kind of the other 1%ers that get it. Other people don't get it. And so I understand that, which is why sometimes you need to talk to the other 1%ers, or you need to see a counselor or someone like that as well. But yeah, ultimately you do need to move through those emotions so that you can get to a place of perspective, and so you can get to a place of gratitude, and you can move on with your life, because that's a really important part of the healing as well. But it's just, what happens is we kind of skip some steps along the way, and we try and go from, I've just had this dreadful experience and trauma or whatever it is, to I'm fine, and it doesn't work that way. So if we try and skip the steps in between that involves the grieving and the fear and all that, which I know it's not fun to have to go through all that, but it's part of it. It's a part of the human experience. If we don't go through that, then yeah, we miss out on that experience, which is a really really important experience. So there's one other thing. I just playing with my phone because I just wanted to find this to bring up as well. Just talking about news, I think it's probably useful that I throw in little snippets of news in these podcasts where I can. So. And just my reaction to different things in the news. So, this week in the news, it was about hot chips and they're linked to depression. So, there was a study in China that found a link between hot chips and depression. So what they found though is so it was linked with a 12% higher risk of anxiety and a 7% higher risk of depression compared to people who didn't eat fried foods. So the study was in general about fried foods. But what they found is that they found it was worse. It's something like potatoes, fried potatoes, compared to say something like chicken. So 2% worse or something like that. So, my response to this is a few things. So, yeah, it is important to see these studies, and I think that there's a few factors in this. So, one factor is that and one thing to just to point out as well is that when we are feeling depressed or sad, we are more likely to go for comfort food. So sometimes with these nutrition studies, you've got to understand they can go the other way as well, that you're more likely to eat the thing because you're feeling depressed, because you don't go and eat broccoli when you're feeling depressed. You go for your fried foods, your carbs, your chippies, potato chips, whatever it is, right? So that's one thing just to kind of be aware of. The other thing is that it was less when they had fried chicken as opposed to fried potato. Chicken contains protein, and protein helps balance our blood sugar levels. And protein is what you make your brain neurotransmitters out of, things like serotonin that helps you make you feel happy. So the fact that the person's having fried chicken would indicate that there's protein in their diet, so there's probably more nutrition in their diet, and so they're less likely to have the effects. The other thing would be that we do know that ultra processed foods cause a lot of these issues just ultra processed foods cause a whole bunch of disease. And so the more processed the food is, the more problematic it is. So that's why I always talk about eating ingredients rather than things that have ingredients. The other aspect of this is that it's the fats and oils that they use. So they usually use really, really poor quality seed oils, cottonseed oils, and things like that to fry foods in. And generally, they use the same oil over and over again, and the oil is heated and oxidized and damaged over and over and over again. So you're having an oil that might not be good quality to start with, and it's oxidized and damaged. And those oils do cause health problems. They cause oxidative stress, aging, damage. And you can certainly help to counteract that by having the antioxidants. So foods that are full of antioxidants, whether that be things like omega-3 fish oils or whether it be all of your colorful fruit and veggies and things, that helps. And obviously having protein to support your brain health. Like all things, it comes down to a version of moderation, whatever moderation looks like for you to be healthy. Because people talk about moderation. Oh, I'm doing it moderate. But moderation is only a thing. It's probably another topic for me for another podcast. Moderation is only a thing if you're actually healthy. So I do it in moderation, so I'm fine. Well, if you are fine, then that's true. But if you're not, then it's not. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is, if you eat a balanced diet, you look after yourself, you're eating lots of antioxidants, and you're sometimes having fried food, it's probably a non-issue for you. But if your diet is largely fried food and you're not really eating any protein and you're not having any antioxidants, it's going to be a real problem for you. And of course, you can make things like chips and things. You can make it with olive oil baked in the oven and things like that. So, or they've got air fryers and things. So there's ways of having the same thing, not all of the time, but sometimes without those fats that can be a problem. So anyway, that was just the latest of the sort of different studies. I'll kind of bring up different studies in the podcast to tell you what's going on, but that's my 2 cents worth about what that study means or how you can reduce your risk. Anyway, that's enough for today. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining me. Thanks. Bye bye.